Welcome to Worth Your Time with your hosts from the nationally syndicated Bob and Tom Show, Kristi Lee, and the president and CEO of the Indianapolis Zoo, Dr. Rob Shumaker. Our mission to inform, entertain, and educate with guests from all aspects of life. We guarantee there isn't another podcast that features two hosts with such different backgrounds and discussions with remarkable people doing exceptional things. So let's get started. Here are your hosts, Kristi Lee and Dr. Rob Shumaker.
Welcome once again to Worth Your Time. I'm Kristi Lee along with Dr. Rob Shumaker. This is part 2 of a fascinating tale, a talk of slithering about snakes, and not just about snakes.
Such a great topic.
It is a wonderful topic because it deals with how we as people feel about snakes, not necessarily good or bad, but trying to demystify. That's how I look at it. You're trying to demystify the snake, and many people have a horrible fear of them.
It's the truth, and you know, I'm a huge snake fan. I love snakes, and the thing I say all the time when I meet somebody who likes snakes, or even better, if I meet somebody that I can kind of help along to like snakes or love snakes too, you know, my phrase is snakes need all the friends they can get.
Yeah.
And man, we got a great friend to snakes.
Yes, we do. A wonderful guest
today. Second episode with Stephen S. Hall. Steve has written a phenomenal new book called Slither, all about snakes and people, and really a totally unexpected kind of volume with chapter titles that I couldn't decipher. I had no idea where we were going, which I loved.
The wasabi one, which we talked about in part 1, which you need to go back and listen.
You got to know wasabi has to do with this book.
Right.
There are just so many wonderful things, and we were going to start off this episode by talking about the attitudes that people have developed about snakes, but on the negative side.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a lot in the last episode about great attitudes about snakes historically, but it leads us straight to Adam and Eve. Steve, you want to try and defend snakes a little bit there in Genesis?
Yeah, it actually comes out of the Asclepius story that we talked about previously in a very interesting way. According to some pretty good scholars of Greek mythology with whom I've spoken, with the rise of Christianity and Jesus Christ, who was a divine healer, the main rival of Jesus was perceived to be Asclepius.
Wow.
The Greek god who's associated with all these sanctuaries and healing from Greece. And as a result of that, with the rise of Christianity, Asclepius and the cult was really targeted as something to be essentially banned. It wasn't that it wasn't popular with the people, it was that it was outlawed because it was a competitor to Christianity. And then you find this demonization of the snake ultimately encoded in the Bible in the Genesis story. So suddenly the snake, where previously it's been a symbol of health, mystery, origin story, then becomes a symbol of sin. One of the interesting, if you read the part of Genesis where the snake actually intervenes, you see that God ultimately says there shall be enmity between all the children of Eve, which is essentially all of humanity, and all the offspring of the snake, which is all of the snakes and current serpendoms. So eternal enmity between humans and snakes is essentially declared by God at the end of this sequence in the Garden of Eden. And that, I think, has carried over into the religious art, where you see the snake then depicted as evil. There's a fantastic Caravaggio show, or just finished in Rome, and one of his most famous paintings is the Virgin Mother showing the baby Jesus how to stomp on the head of a snake. And that's, you know, I liken that kind of to a YouTube instructional video in the Renaissance mode. I mean, these images had an enormous amount of impact on how people perceive things. So I think with the rise of Christianity, there was a simultaneous rise in the detestation of snakes, which obviously has continued to this day and has carried over. Now, the one thing I'd like to point out is there are only 3 creatures in the Bible that have the capacity to speak or have a conversation with humans. There's Balaam's donkey, there's the eagle on Revelations, and there's the snake. And I keep reminding people that snakes are still talking to us, and we should be mindful of what they can tell us if we don't kill them and we try to understand them, to get back to your earlier point.
So it's
Scientific-
unchristian to like snakes?
Well, don't say that. We're trying to go forward here.
Well, that's kind of what they were saying.
Well, a long time ago.
Yeah. Poor
We
snakes.
can evolve.
Now I feel bad.
That's incredible. All right. Well, talking about, maybe we can go forward about people that like snakes.
I want to talk. Can we talk about the chapter on sex reproduction in snakes?
Slow down.
I want to know about that part.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm
gonna
gonna
run out of time.
No, we won't. There's too much. There's so many topics. We'll just get to a couple more.
All right. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about people that like snakes, people that are fascinated with snakes, and I want to read. I want to quote you, Steve, and here's early in the book. You say, decades ago, keeping snakes as pets was a hobby reserved for weirdos, loners, and people with perhaps an unseemly hunger for attention, like that guy, and it always seems to be a guy, who's walking down the boardwalk with a boa constrictor on his shoulders. Well,
I don't think that's changed.
I was going to say, I kind of resemble that remark. So help me out a little bit here. Help me feel a little bit better about my fascination with snakes.
Well, I was saying that in the sense that I think that was the kind of perception and cliche of earlier generation. I'm sure you've maybe gone to a reptile expo in recent years. It's like a family affair. I mean,
that is true.
Husbands and wives, moms and dads, kids, lots of kids, and a lot of kids like to have snakes as pets. And there are an enormous number of snakes on sale at these reptile expos.
Honestly, this is the truth, Steve.
Really?
This is the truth 3 weeks ago.
You did this 3 weeks ago?
I was at one 3 weeks ago, and you have called it 100% correctly. It is, there are a huge number of families there, and it's always parents with little kids, and the kids are ecstatic.
Yeah. And I think, to get back to this cognitive, cultural, educational thing, when kids are exposed to snakes in a way where they're not threatened or not told to be that the snakes are threatening, they're much more open and receptive to the idea of holding them, having them as pets. And I think that's part of what changes attitudes.
Do they make a good pet?
Oh, well.
No, I'm serious. Do they?
Are you asking? I can tell.
Does a snake make a good pet?
I can answer. I'll answer for me, my opinion. Then Steve, you weigh in.
Okay.
First of all, it depends on the kind of snake.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, it depends on what you think you want from a pet. A pet snake is not the same as a puppy or a kitten. It is different, but if you
it'll eat your kitten.
It would. Well, that was helpful. Thanks.
Sorry.
That was awesome.
I have to put some levity in here. I was just kidding.
Okay. Well, it's true. but I think the point is, you have to know what you're getting. You have to know what you're getting into, and you have to be serious about it. And if you're serious about it, it requires a level of expertise in terms of care. That's super important. You have to also have the right expectation if you're going to do it right. I'll give you a personal example, and this one's true. So I have one of the snakes I have at home is now, I've had it since it was just maybe a few weeks old, and it's now, I think, in its early 40s.
Whoa.
It's over 40 years old. I've had that.
Is it affectionate?
No. Not at all.
Does it know you?
I doubt it.
What kind of snake is it?
A ball python. And it was when ball pythons were still unusual, and
Mhm.
it was probably one of the first years that people kept ball pythons as pets. And I didn't go out and get it. It's a long story, but somebody had it and just kind of abandoned it. And a friend said, "Would you take this?" And I said, "Sure." So
How big is it?
It's a rescue snake.
it is
Rescue
I've got I have
How many
several.
snakes do you have?
I didn't count. I don't know. I have several rescue snakes, but the rescue snakes, these are not from neglect or abuse.
Right.
It's that people don't know what they've gotten into,
Yeah.
and they just can't keep it. Or here's the thing that happens a lot. Sorry, Steve. I shouldn't be talking. This is about you. I'll say one last thing. I'll stop talking. That this happens all the time, and it always happens it's coming up for us in like August. The phone calls or the social media posts or whatever, my son, sometimes my daughter,
Going to
is
college.
going to college. Can somebody take this snake? They can't take it with them. They're not allowed to have it. And what's happened is a kid has gotten a snake as a pet. They've loved it. They've done a great job with it. It's healthy. It's wonderful. And now they're stuck because they didn't think through, well, if you get the snake when you're 12, it's going to be around in a few years if you do a good job with it, and you go to college and you get stuck. All right, Steve, back to you, man.
I got a couple things to say about this. One, both scientists and people who have pets have told me, and they probably have told you, that snakes do have personalities.
For
They
sure.
have different temperaments.
Really?
For sure.
Depending on the species, depending on the individual snake. And again, getting back to Harry Green, one of the great things in his research, having these radio tags in snakes and letting them go in the wild and then tracking them, suddenly they're individuals, right? They have a particular identity, they have a name, and you begin to attach behaviors to that particular snake, and they have idiosyncratic behaviors. So anyway, people will tell you that the snakes have personalities. In terms of the ease of keeping them, one of the most interesting scientific articles in Nature in probably the last 25 years was an article by Jared Diamond.
Oh, he's fantastic. We've talked about him a bunch of times. What a brilliant author.
Physiologist and Stephen Secor, who is in his lab proposing that scientists should study animals that had extreme physiological capabilities like pythons, in part because they were so easy to take care of. They're minimal upkeep. They eat about once a month. And so anyway, long and short of it is about roughly, I don't know, 15 years after this article came out, they started to have the Genome Project for pythons. And what's come out of that, and it's still coming out, literally last fall, there was another paper that sort of followed on this whole story. They identified a number of genes in pythons that became active almost the moment they started eating a meal. And what they've discovered from this entire process is these snakes have the capacity to regenerate organs. They can make their organs much bigger in order to digest the meal. And then they sculpt away all the new tissue that they just created and go back to normal state with a very low metabolic rate when they're done eating. It's all controlled genetically. They don't have all the controls down. But what this means is, and it has implications for human health in a way, the snakes are able to make a heart bigger to pump all the stuff they're digesting. And these pythons have enormous meals. In humans, cardiac hypertrophy is a disease. It's an enlarged heart. It means the heart is working too hard and it's not working efficiently and effectively. The snakes know how to create this state in order to do something they need to do by adding cells, remodeling the organs, and then they cancel everything, and it's like a short-lived cancer where the cells proliferate and then they cure it and it comes back down to normal. And they do this on a repeated basis when they're metabolizing a big meal. The other big surprise is that because these meals are so large, there's this gush of growth signals which would normally be fatal to almost any other organism, and would, among other things, would probably create type 2 diabetes, where you just have so much insulin, which is the growth signal, so high that the body would just turn off to even receiving it, and consequently everything would kind of shut down. The snakes can override this insulin signal. So somehow they avoid getting the equivalent of type 2 diabetes as they're digesting these meals, and then it all settles back down again. So now they're trying to tease apart what's the mechanism that allows them to do this, because there may have implications for diabetes treatment in humans as well. Now, who knows where this story is going to go, but I don't think anybody thought when they watched a Burmese python, ingest a big meal, had any notion that all this really phenomenal biochemistry was going on, but invisibly, that we didn't know anything about. And again, it's been just in the last couple of years where they're really starting to put all the pathways together, and it may have implications for human metabolic diseases too. So it's pretty
absolutely incredible.
That is incredible.
All right, Kristi, go ahead.
But no, that leads to the chapter
ahead.
on pythons in the book. Let's not skip around.
Well, no, do your topic. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you want to talk about the python lady, or do you want to talk about sex reproduction? It's up to you,
you tell
Steve.
me what you want to talk about.
Well,
I'm happy to talk about both of them.
I think the sex reproduction is probably more interesting to our listeners. Don't you think? Yes.
Yes. Go, Steve.
Yes.
So there's a researcher named Patty Brennan at Mount Holyoke College who gained a certain amount of notoriety about 15 years ago when she was studying duck anatomy, and demonstrated that the female duck's vagina was a corkscrew shape, and the male penis was also a corkscrew shape, but going in the opposite direction. And so the obvious question was, why would this anatomical incompatibility be, anatomically encoded in male and female? And the answer was that there's a lot of forced copulation in ducks. So this was the female response to the
did we lose him? Oh, there we go.
Oh
no!
Oh. Hey, sorry, Steve.
Sorry.
Hey, you froze up for a minute, so we'll edit this. But I wonder if you can go back and you said there was an anatomical incompatibility, and then you kind of froze.
Okay, so there's this mechanical incompatibility, and you would say, well, why would you want to discourage reproduction, which is necessary? And part of the answer is that in ducks there's a lot of forced copulation. So in other words, this is the female response to forced copulation is making it harder.
Gotcha.
So she got very intrigued by this, and somebody at Yale said, well, if you think, bird anatomy or genitalia are interesting, you should look at snakes. So she started looking at snakes, and what she's discovered is, depending on the species, there's either a huge amount of antagonism that's reflected in the anatomy of the snakes or not. And one of the first surprises, it's not a surprise to herpetologists who've known it for a long time. Male snakes have two penises. They're called hemipenes. And one of them is deployed during reproduction. But in cases where the female may not be receptive to the male, they've evolved hooks, pits, almost like grappling hooks, to hang on to a female that might be sort of trying to repel them. That's not true of all species, but it's true in some. And by Patty Brennan at Mount Holyoke has been mapping in three-dimensional computerized shapes all these variations in male and female genitalia to see the evolutionary story of compatibility or sexual antagonism. It's fascinating. And in the course of this, she, with some colleagues in Australia, were the first to report in the scientific literature that there's a female equivalent to the hemipenes, which is a hemiclitoris. So, and this was a big story a couple of years ago when it came out. It got a huge amount of play. And one of the questions that they asked informally is, this was sitting around for 100 years. The hemipenes were described at the end of the 19th century. Why did it take so long to find the female equivalent? And the answer
it's
is,
a female.
Yeah. So,
Nobody cares about the girl.
Yeah. And anyway, so they have models. They create these sort of plaster caster, if you recall the plaster casters from the 70s, models of male and female genitalia, and they have them in the lab. And it's like they're like museum pieces. In fact, they've been making reproductions of them in plastic just to sort of as illustrations. But it's a really interesting and neat story about how sexes respond to each other if there's antagonistic or not unantagonistic or compatible interactions sexually. Really interesting stuff.
Yes, very interesting.
It is.
And you didn't want to talk about it.
Trust me, it's a fantastic topic. And one of the things I love your description, Steve, when you talk about garter snake reproduction. And you want to describe that? If someone who has never seen it, it is remarkable.
So there's a researcher, Patty Brennan, who I just mentioned, participated in some of this research, but Robert Mason, who's at Oregon State University, has been going up to Manitoba because there are these populations of garter snakes that emerge all at once at the end of winter. And basically what happens is there's perhaps a single female and anywhere from 20, 50, 100 male suitors all trying to impregnate her. And you can imagine this writhing ball, this snake ball. There's like thousands and thousands of snakes. And Rick Shine, who's also a very well-known herpetologist in Australia, has collaborated with Bob Mason's group, and he just said what's really amazing about it, one is you see, these thousands and thousands of sex-crazed male snakes, but the other thing is that they don't care about you being there. He says usually when you're looking for snakes, they scatter as soon as they can or get away from you. They don't care that they're there. They're just after the females, and it's hard not to step on them. And they've tracked this interaction. And again, garter snake is an example of the snakes. The males have these hooks to hold on because the females are trying to get away from, being assaulted literally by dozens and dozens of male snakes simultaneously.
Now, I have
did some pretty cool experiments to show kind of what was going on. If the snakes had their hooks clipped, then the copulation lasted much less time and reduced the odds of there actually being a successful reproduction. So it's really interesting.
I mean, I know people that have been to those populations and they literally describe it as being ankle deep in garter snakes. Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Yep.
Steve is shaking his head. Yes.
That's not helping with the fear thing.
Well, they're harmless.
I know.
I mean, they're harmless,
garter
and
snakes,
they're not paying attention to people, as Steve says.
Yeah.
So ankle deep.
Yeah.
So hey, I guess we should. People will wonder if we don't talk about this. I think we should spend a couple minutes on venom, because it's such an incredible topic. You do such a beautiful job talking about it in the book from a whole variety of perspectives. Can I ask you to start with one bit of information, and that is the number of people in the United States who die from a venomous snake bite every year, on average?
I love to ask audiences what they think. And I gave a talk not long ago, and I said, how many? And somebody said 100, 1,000. The average is roughly five or six people who actually
in a year in the United States.
In the United States. And in fact, one of the things, I was curious. I looked up these CDC statistics for like how many people die of a bee sting or lightning strike. And it's all, 4, 5, 10 times more than a snake bite. There are about 8,000 envenomations, which are when the snake actually bites and injects venom. But the medical care in the United States is so good that people get to the hospital quick enough to get care. It's interesting. I'm actually going to be giving a talk at a bookstore in northern Wisconsin in about a month. And the bookstore's owner was camping in Montana with her family when her son got bitten by a rattlesnake and had to be a helicopter evacuated to a medical center. But, he received treatment and he's fine. Where snakebite is a very serious concern is in developing countries, especially in Africa and in Southeast Asia. So in India, for example, the figures are not hard, and there's a lot of variation, but pretty close to 60,000 people a year die of snake bite in India. And worldwide, there's about 2,700,000 snake bites altogether, and maybe about 138,000 deaths, according to the World Health Organization. And Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the UN, once said that snake bite is the most important tropical disease you've never heard of. So I was just at a meeting, again, a couple of weeks ago called Venom Week, and there are a number of very cutting-edge developments in terms of antibody treatments. Anti-venom is the classic treatment, but there are now some clinical testing going on of some other compounds that could actually be taken as a pill. And some of them are being tested in the veterinary setting. And there was a veterinarian who showed movies of dogs in Florida that had been bitten by coral snakes, which have a very neurotoxic venom and normally really lays them low. And they would get into this drug shortly after they were bitten, and you could literally see them reviving, getting up on their legs, which they couldn't stand before, and acting very dog-like within 2 or 3 days after receiving the injection. So there are some new medical, at least possibilities in train that might actually reach the world, and it is a very, very serious problem in other parts of the world. So these could offer some solutions or help.
Has anyone found a good use for venom? I mean, is there anything that the medical world could use in a positive way?
You've ever heard of drugs called ACE inhibitors?
Mm-mm. I
They're
haven't.
one of the most widely used hypertension drugs for high blood pressure.
Okay.
Lisinopril, captopril, there's about a dozen of them. That was based on a protein that was isolated from the venom of a South American viper.
Oh, well, there we go.
It's a great story. I don't have time probably to tell it in the book, but how they discovered this and how they produced this drug, which is one of the all-time best-selling drugs in history, has probably saved millions of lives because of its power to reduce high blood pressure. A guy from South America showed up in a lab in London with a tiny little packet of dried snake venom, and that was the basis ultimately for the drug that was developed that's been used now for probably 45 years roughly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I think it's such a great question, and I love your answer, Steve, because we so often talk about the threats of snakes or people's fears of snakes, but snakes are unbelievably beneficial to humans in so many ways. One of the I don't know an actual statistic. I'm curious if you do, but I have heard wild speculation about the amount of grain destined for human food or to support humans that would otherwise be eaten by mice and rats if snakes weren't controlling the rodent populations.
Yeah, I don't have figures on that, but there is no question that snakes have been an enormously effective environmental control on rodents in an agricultural setting. And I know there are efforts by herpetologists to convince farmers and agriculturalists that you don't want to kill the snakes, you actually want to keep them for rodent control. I sometimes jokingly suggest to friends that maybe one of the ways we could control the rat problem in New York was to import snakes. I have a feeling there'd be a public relations problem, but nonetheless, that there would be a very effective control of a rat population. That's what they do.
Well, I share so much your concern for snakes, Steve, and I love how you present it in the book. And you present a statistic that I was familiar with, and it jumped off the page to me instantly, that according to the IUCN Red List, which is the best source on biodiversity around the world, 21% of all reptiles, now that's not just snakes, but lots of snakes are in there too, 21% of all reptile species are threatened with extinction. And that doesn't even document populations that are declining or on the verge of being in trouble. This book, Slither, does such a wonderful job of educating and informing and inspiring people to care about snakes. It is a conservation priority. And Steve, I wonder as we wrap up, can you make your pitch for people conserving snakes or at least not harming them? How about that?
Well, I think this idea of not harming them is really important. And one of the things I say, it's never a bad idea to back away from or not from a venomous snake. That's certainly true. But again, we're all in this together. If when it comes to the environment, climate change, the extremes in weather that we're seeing, it's all interconnected. And ecologies are such fragile webs of interaction that if you start tinkering or privileging certain creatures and not others, in the end, you're going to be perturbing a balance that's been achieved over a long period of time with a lot of delicacy and sort of interactional experience. So, to the degree that if we don't have to love snakes, but if we can at least refrain from killing them or disturbing them, you're actually helping, if you will, the citizenry of the local ecology, that they belong there too. They need to be there, and we need to acknowledge that we benefit from their being there. So, to the extent you can refrain from hurting them, you don't have to love them. You don't have to bring them home with you, but you can, if you just leave them alone, they will do their job, and they'll be a important part of the ecosystem.
Well, you've convinced me.
Good.
I'm going to read the book.
Take it.
I was afraid to. I'm not going to lie.
Nope.
I was a little afraid of the topic, but now I am fascinated and I can't wait to read the book. So I will be buying my copy of Slither as soon as we're done.
Stephen S. Hall's most recent book is Slither. If you love snakes, you will greatly enjoy this book. If you don't like snakes at all, you will greatly enjoy this book. This book is written for everybody. Congratulations, Steve, on such a phenomenal success. You must be so proud of this work. I certainly am. I'm so glad I read it. We can't thank you enough for being here today. Worth your time.
Yes, we are
Thank
so
you very
grateful.
much for having me.
That was a very interesting conversation with Mr. Steve S. Hall, the author of Slither. And we were on Zoom with Mr. Hall, and we have hung up from Stephen, and now you have brought out one of your pet snakes. His name is Frank. And we are going to invite everybody to listen to our podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. It's called Worth Your Time with Dr. Rob Shumaker and Kristi Lee. And I have to admit that I'm not afraid of snakes, but I'm not one that would run out and, hey, wrap that around me Britney Spears style or anything.
That's okay. Now, listen, we got to tell people as you're getting progressively less comfortable here. I wanted to make sure that I would tell everybody, I did ask you if you were okay with this.
Yes, you did. And I am okay.
And you're okay with it.
But now that he's out and he's like staring me in the eyes and...
So so people know if they're not watching a video, which by the way, you can see on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, anywhere that you want to listen to our podcast.
Listening, Frank?
Here's the thing. This is a Madagascan ground boa, also called a Dumerel's ground boa, about 6 feet long, an absolutely spectacular, beautiful, gorgeous snake that's used to being handled. And I thought it was cool to bring in a wonderful, beautiful snake that people can admire, not venomous. Right. I would never have a venomous snake as a pet, but I thought it was a good opportunity to do that. Here's the other thing that I think is important. I would never do anything that would force someone or scare someone or startle someone. Never. So you don't have to hold him. You don't have to touch him.
No,
but you are doing an incredible job being close. Now, here's the thing, which I got to explain.
Yeah, he's got his mouth open now.
He does not have his mouth open. So if
does he make noises?
That's just air escaping a little bit. So if you touch a snake, the scales all go towards the tail. They all point backwards. So imagine if you bent your fingernail in the wrong direction, like if you push the scales in the wrong direction. So you don't want to do that. So if you want to touch him, I'm going to hold his head, and you start towards his head and you go backwards towards the tail. And I'm going to...
Does he like that?
Well, I think, you know what I think snakes like a lot is they like the warmth. They like the sense of your warm skin on their skin. That's clearly a pleasant sensation. So when you hold the snake, let's say you have a sleeveless shirt on or shorts on or something, they like to be against your skin because it's nice and warm, much more than not.
So powerful.
Can't you feel that strength? That's that great episode 1 when you talked about ardency. That it's just all muscle. It's incredible.
That is incredible.
So I'm happy to always hold a snake and let somebody get a chance to see what it feels like. And then he is wrapped around my leg just for his own, no, it's for his own comfort. So he feels safe that he's not falling, but you can just feel the unbelievable strength. So here, I'll make the point now. So what I can do is just reach over and he just comes right off. So it's not what you think of in movies or TV shows where you can't get him off of someone. No, it just comes right off. But then I'll put it right back so he can be nice and warm.
So he's pretty strike out, would he?
I think snakes they respond, and unless you've been rubbing a dead mouse on your hands or something, no, I don't think they will.
Is that what he eats?
They big rats, yeah, dead rats.
Where do you get a rat?
You buy them from a supplier, and they come dead, and they come frozen.
Boy, your freezer must be fun.
If you're going to have reptiles, that's part of the deal, is they eat.
Do you have a generator, I hope?
I do not have a generator.
You guys need a generator.
What
if you have a power outage
you leave the freezer closed.
Okay.
So they have, we have a freezer just for this.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, so it's not kitchen, of course.
But snakes eat whole body items. They eat whole mice, whole rats, bigger snakes, even bigger things.
But like, where does he live? Do you hold him like on the couch or something while you're watching TV?
No.
Okay.
But they live in an enclosure. They have, depending on their size, a very large aquarium or something larger than that, like a big, I don't know what to call it, like a cabinet style.
But you don't let them out to exercise, do you?
No, you don't have to walk your snake. They kind of, that's not what they do anyway. In the wild, snakes don't go around very much.
Lay around?
Yeah,
because they have to digest their food.
Steve's saying it. They do a big meal and then they shut down for a while and digest. Right. So that's pretty typical. But you can see he's now totally relaxed, totally easy, just relax. And I'm not holding hard. I'm not gripping. It's just holding him so he's supported. There's not any grip at all here. I'm just supporting him so he doesn't.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible.
This was supposed to be a close, and now we've done a whole show on this snake.
But you know what? I'm proud of you for being so close and for touching him and getting over the hesitation. I'm proud of you for that, because a lot of people have trouble with that.
No, I am not afraid of him, and I wouldn't. You can put him on my legs if you want, but I don't think that's...
Here's the thing I would say. I think Steve hit the nail on the head when he said, this is not about trying to make people want a snake as a pet or love a snake or even want to hold a snake. No, it's just respecting them enough that your inclination is not fear or to damage or kill the snake in some way. That's all it really is. You just leave them alone.
Fortunately, where we live, we don't run into Madagascar
boa constrictors. No.
No.
But anyway.
We might have a garter snake or two. Thank you.
Want to do another close?
No, this has been a great
good enough close?
Yeah, it's a fascinating show, a great topic, and boy, you never know what you're going to hear on Worth Your Time.
Nope, Slither, Stephen S. Hall. It's a great book.
I'm going to slither out of here now.
You've been listening to Worth Your Time with Dr. Rob Shumaker and Kristi Lee. If you like what you hear, please give a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best compliment. Thanks to our producers, Chris Spangle of Leaders and Legends, LLC. You can reach him at leadersandlegends.net. Also, thanks to Sophie Ritz. I'm Christopher Geisen. Thanks for joining us.